éramos como aproximadamente un grupo de 15 personas. Al final, cuando salimos de
We
la,
started with
de
about
la selva, yo
75
salí
people,
descalzo, sin
Venezuelans,
ropa,
Cubans,
con
and
una
people from other
camisa
countries,
rota.
and came out with only 15. So there were about 60 people that we had to leave along the way. We tried to rescue people when they got into some kind of trouble, but people were stranded, and some of them were children. I came close to dying in that jungle several times. I think it was thanks to God that I got out of there alive.
Welcome to Deep Dive with me, Sean C. Fettig. In July of last year, 2022, Lever Alejos emerged from the jungle in Panama with no shoes and just the tattered remains of clothes that still clung to his body after almost a week trekking through the Darien Gap, a 60-mile stretch of untamed, undeveloped jungle between Colombia and Panama. Lever was coming from Venezuela, escaping political persecution and in search of a better life. On arriving at the Texas border, he was processed by the United States government and then put on a bus out of the state, not knowing where he was being sent, presumably at the direction of Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Although the governors of Texas, Arizona, and Florida have all employed this practice with immigrants arriving at the border, and they have done so shrouded in secrecy. So the details remain unclear as to which governor is responsible for which bus. This fact alone is unsettling, and to my mind, I have to wonder why keep it a secret unless one is worried about its legality or its humanity. In end, Lever was dropped off in Washington, D.C., and this is currently where he is. This episode is about Lever and his experience coming to the United States, why he left Venezuela, what his journey here was like, how he's being received in the United States, and what he hopes for his future. While this is a very personal story, I urge you to consider this when listening. This is one of thousands of similar stories of people fleeing persecution, violence, war, and torture at the hands of their governments, most often authoritarian governments. Lever was one of the lucky few to have successfully made it, and by that I mean survived the journey. Many people have died trying, either succumbed to the environment or have been murdered by police, cartels, bandits, and other nefarious actors. As you will hear from Lever, people are putting their lives very literally on the line for a better life than the one their own government is providing. And regardless of your politics, this should give you some pause. At minimum, to consider how lucky we all are to live in the country that we do. Lever speaks primarily Spanish, and I speak primarily English. So while I conducted the interview in Spanish, I have enlisted the help of a friend, Justin Henches, someone that's appeared in a couple of earlier episodes of Deep Dive, to be the voice of Lever in English. If you like this episode or any episode, please feel free to give it a like on your favorite podcast platform and or subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. And as always, if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please email me at deepdivewithsean@gmail.com. Let's do a deep dive. Lever, welcome. Before we get to how you ended up in the States, let's start with a bit of your background. So tell me about your family, like where you were born and a little bit about growing up.
Bueno, yo nací en la ciudad de Barinas, del estado Barinas.
I was born in
Eso en
Venezuela,
Venezuela es el
in the
estado
city of
llanero, un
Barinas.
estado
It is
ganadero.
an area that has a lot of cattle ranching, but I was only there for the first 3 months of my life. My mom took me to Barquisimeto in the state of Lada, which is a lot more industrial, a pretty developed city with a lot of companies and a lot of trade. It's there that my mom met my foster father, the person that I call my dad. I have his last name, and he is the only father that I know. I don't know anything about my birth father. So my mom had 2 daughters with my dad, my half-sisters. So there were 5 of us, and we lived in a cement house that had 4 rooms total, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and then a big living area in the center. My parents still live there, but one of my sisters lives in Bogota, and the other, well, she is dead. She was murdered 3 years ago by the police.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. How awful.
Sí,
Tell me about your childhood. Did you have friends? What did you do in your free time?
cuando llegaba las vacaciones de la escuela,
As
solíamos ir
kids, we would spend a lot of time at my grandfather's house, my mom's dad, especially during school vacations. I had a lot of friends where I grew up that I would play with. There were about 7 or 8 boys that all lived near each other, and we went to the same school. I really liked school. I was a smart kid and a quick learner. We played a lot of baseball and soccer together, and our families would all get together for holidays. It was a tradition to get together on Christmas, like 25 or more of us. We would have a Christmas dinner, just like Thanksgiving in the United States, with ham, bread, cream, pork leg. Now we are all over the place. I am in the United States, and some of my friends are here too. Others are in Chile, and some are still in Venezuela. It was a very beautiful childhood. Very nice.
Was or is your family religious?
y bueno, desde chiquito yo fui
Yeah.
a la
In
iglesia
fact,
evangélica.
my mother is the daughter of Christian pastors, and since I was little, I went to this evangelical church. But I stopped going when I was 13, and didn't start going again until I was 17 when I was baptized. I started pursuing a spiritual leadership career in some churches. There are some highly renowned ministries in Venezuela, and being involved with the church helped me. It led me to have principles and values, and to be myself with everyone, even if I am different or if they are different. It helped me to be patient and to learn to be wise, to try to learn from my mistakes, and to value advice that other older people could give me. It helped me a lot in high school when I was young. I made a lot of mistakes, and thank God I had a pastor that was a direct positive influence in my life and helped me in such a way that I could also help other people.
So let's talk about life in Venezuela, maybe a bit more generally, like healthcare and amenities and utilities. Are these things available, and are they reasonably priced, and are they stable and consistent?
Bueno, realmente en el aspecto
In the past,
social,
healthcare was free.
respecto a la salud,
Anybody could go for an exam or evaluation and get medication at no cost. But that's not possible anymore. Other services, like electricity and water, those are free. People don't pay, but they are not stable. The services are intermittent. Sometimes the electricity is just cut off without any real explanation, and water is worse. Sometimes there is no water for 2 or even 3 weeks. In fact, I participated in some protests related to water service because we had gone 3 weeks without water. People were forced to buy water from cisterns, and it cost about $10 a tank that lasts about a week. So 3 weeks of water in 3 tanks, about $30. In Venezuela, people earn about $20 to $30 a month. So everything you earn in a month is gone, spent on just water. So what about food? There's plenty of food available, but it is expensive and there's no money left after paying for water anyway. It's a big problem. Inflation is high in Venezuela at the same time that Venezuelan salaries are at their lowest ever. And government institutions are failing as well. It wasn't always like this, but police and security services have become completely corrupt. While there is no regular system to pay for things like electricity and water, as I said, they are supposed to be free, the government has found ways to charge for them, like I explained with the water. So they take money even though it is supposed to be free. In the Constitution of Venezuela, the president manages the national treasury, which includes things like oil, aluminum, iron, etc. And the government is then supposed to use that money to provide basic services. Technically, this is supposed to mean that people receive electricity, healthcare, security, water, everything that a person needs to be able to be successful and develop in a society. But it is corrupt. It is a socio-political and economic crisis in Venezuela right now.
I actually want to focus on this last part a bit. And we can start with the economic situation. Is work difficult to get or maintain in Venezuela? And does it pay a living wage? And what did you do?
Bueno, en Venezuela existen dos sistemas económicos, el público y el privado.
In Venezuela, there are two economic systems, the public and the private. The public establishes a universal minimum salary of $30 per month, while the private establishes a salary more like a capitalist system, based on how much of something is sold. I worked repairing power tools. I had a friend who made me his partner in a power tools business. Some weeks I could earn $30 to $40, sometimes only $10. Sometimes there was a lot of work, and some weeks there was none. When there was none, sometimes I would have to sell tools or trade tools for something. This could be a problem if the supply ran out. It threw off the supply and demand balance. Without supply, no money. I also used some of the money I made during this to start a pork business. I bred pigs to sell for meat, but by this point, I was participating in protests in Venezuela, and the communal council told the police that I was a person who was dangerous to the public peace. They began to attack me and extort money from me, so I had to sell whatever I had left. I sold the business and left the country.
Are you comfortable telling me more about that?
El gobierno maneja las políticas sociales a través de algo que se llama el Consejo Comunal.
Well, if you want to know a little, I can tell
Estos
you.
consejos comunales, ellos están encargados de...
The government manages social policies through something called the communal council. These councils are in charge of finding people who agree with the government and also people who don't agree with the government. When they identify someone that doesn't agree with the government and participates in protests or something like that, the council notifies the police. And if we work in the private sector, making money from something other than the public sector, then they extort us. The police do this. They also infiltrate protests and participate in such a way to break them down or cause them to lose steam. That's what they did to me. They came to my house, confronted me, and told me that I was dangerous and a threat to social peace in the community, and that if I didn't stop participating in protests and marches, they would put me in jail. But I hadn't actually committed any crime, and I told them that. But they told me they would file some charge anyway, and that one way or another, they would stop me from demonstrating. It was a threat, obviously.
Is your family in Venezuela safe now?
Bueno, mi papá, él antes pertenecía al Consejo Comunal.
My dad previously belonged to the communal council, but as a result of the fact of what happened with me, he was forced to resign, to leave. And since it is only my father and mother that live in that sector, not me or my sisters, they don't represent a danger to the social peace or to the people who manage the council. My father is not on the council anymore, and my mother is not politically involved, so they are safe.
So what ultimately led to you making that decision to leave Venezuela and come to the United States?
Bueno, luego de que me llevaran preso y eso, y me torturaban psicológicamente.
Eventually, they did take me to prison, and they tortured me psychologically. After that, after I was let out, an opportunity presented itself to me. A person wanted to buy the entire business from me, and so I decided to sell the business. The pigs were already at an average age for slaughter to be sold for meat, so selling the business was relatively easy. At that time, I was also reading online and also seeing on television that in the United States they were accepting Venezuelans who came because of some kind of political persecution. Some people went to Colombia, some to Mexico, and some to the United States. I thought the best option for me was the United States. So together with my friend, my business partner from the tool repair business, we decided to leave our city, our country, and come here to the United States. It took about a month for us to really decide we were going to do it and also plan for it. It was not easy because I have a son there in Venezuela, and in one way or another, my friend understood that. that I could not just leave immediately. I couldn't really stay inside my city because those people, from the council and the police, were loitering around watching us. They were going to continue extorting me whenever they wanted. It's just a common and constant practice. So I spoke with my parents, I spoke with my mother, I spoke with my son's mother, and I told them that I was going to come to the United States. I told them that I couldn't continue in Venezuela because of the things that had happened to me. They understood my situation and they supported me.
So how did you explain it to them, to your family? And how did you say goodbye? Did you feel like you were leaving and might actually never see them again?
Lo más difícil para mí fue decírselo a mi hijo. Él tiene 7 años. Ya a esa edad él entiende.
Really the hardest thing for me was telling my son. He is only 7 years old. He and I have a relationship of trust. He understands that I will always do what I say. I've never disappointed him by promising something or telling him something that I didn't do or couldn't do. I have never told him I would give him something that I didn't actually have to give him in that moment. I told him that I was going to go to another country, and he looked at me and his eyes watered. He was starting to cry. And he asked if I was going to come back. I told him not to worry, that at some point I had to return for him. He was just staring at me, like he thought that I was leaving for work or going to another country just for a month or two. I tried to explain it to him, but he is 7. So he is sad, and I can see in his behavior that he misses me in his life. Sometimes he doesn't want to bathe for a day or two. He doesn't focus on things anymore because his mind is preoccupied. And he is also doing a lot of things, anything he can think of, to find a way to attract attention. He always asks when I'm coming home. Whenever he talks to me, he asks if he can come to see me and asks when I will bring him. Stuff like that. It's definitely the most difficult thing for me, being separated from my son. But I don't know how to tell him because he's so young and so small that he was maybe in some danger if I stayed in Venezuela. I did design some mechanisms to help him. I bought him a phone so he can communicate with me every day, also write me through text, and I always remind him that I am always there for him, even if not physically right now. I tell him that he can always grab the phone I got him and send me a message or call me and that I'll answer right away. But it's not really enough. I know it's not enough. But for now, it has to be like this. And I hope that what I'm doing now for our future will mitigate all of the feelings that I have being without him and that he has being without me.
So is the plan to reunite with your son in the United States?
Bueno, sí, estuve hablando con la mamá para que ella le saque su
Well,
pasaporte.
yes, I was
de tal
talking
manera de
to my
que
mother
él pueda
so that
venir
she could try to get her passport and also a passport for my son so that he could at least come visit me. Maybe he could visit me on the days that he has vacation from school. I would like for him to have a life here in the United States with me. But of course, his mother is still in Venezuela and wouldn't let him come here for life. I'm trying to investigate if there are any laws in the United States that would allow my son to get a permit to visit me temporarily, like for 2 months or something like a tourist visa, something that would allow him to visit me as soon as possible.
So I've read quite a bit about people from Venezuela coming up through Colombia, which requires coming through the Darien Gap, which is, for folks that don't know, thick, undeveloped jungle. It's very dangerous. And that most people that attempt this turn back, or worse, awful things happen to people trying to make it through. I'd like to know a bit more about your actual journey. Did you come up through the Darien Gap?
Yo me había preparado mentalmente para afrontar ese trayecto, pero realmente las expectativas
Yes,
que uno
I
lleva
can
en la
tell you a
mente
little
no son
fragment.
ajenas a la realidad.
I tried to prepare myself mentally to face that journey. But really, the expectations that one carries in their mind are not the same as reality, you know? There were people that lived in the jungle that stole our food, and we really were just trying to survive with nothing. I remember that after 3 days of walking through the jungle, my shoes got damaged, and I had to walk barefoot for the last 2 days of the journey. So it was 5 days in the jungle, and I came out with no shoes and hardly any clothes. The weather in the jungle is terrible. It was raining all the time and the rivers overflowed. One time I was crossing one of these rivers, and I had a little suitcase that became so waterlogged that it was dragging me under. I had to let it go, or I would have drowned. We started with about 75 people, Venezuelans, Cubans, and people from other countries, and came out with only 15. So there were about 60 people that we had to leave along the way. We tried to rescue people when they got into some kind of trouble, but people were stranded, and some of them were children. I came close to dying in that jungle several times. I think it was thanks to God that I got out of there alive.
How old are you?
Yo tengo 29 años.
29.
You've lived through quite a lot in a short time.
Pienso que sí. Realmente, a esta edad de mi vida,
I think it
soy
has
una
really
persona
been the
que lo
state of
único
my
que
life, you
desea
know?
es tranquilidad.
I'm the type of person that really just wants some calm and peace of mind. In this past year, I have learned a lot. There are things that money can't really buy. You can have food, you can have clothes, you can have cell phones, you can have a car. But there are more important things that money cannot buy. Things that bring you a peace of mind, such as having your family with you, feeling safe, being confident. These are things that money just can't generate for you, no matter how much you have. Anything that comes from people, from family, from friends, is something that cannot be replaced with money. And I think that the reason I have gone through many difficult situations at this age is for me to learn these things. I think it was necessary. It is necessary. I think that sometimes we are like ships in the sea. There is turbulence sometimes, but there's also calm sometimes. And like everyone, I had to go through a storm. I have seen maybe the worst of it, and with the favor of God, I will arrive at a safe port where I can dock with confidence and find some peace.
So you applied for asylum when you arrived in the States. What's your life been like since? Did you find a place to live?
Bueno, sí, actualmente estoy trabajando con unas personas que
Yes, I'm currently working with a few
estoy
people,
viviendo con
and I'm living with a friend I met here in the United States that allows me to stay at her house free of charge, at least until May. As far as my expenses, I am very careful about what I spend. I try to buy clothes that I need, shirts, pants, underwear, when I need them. And about once a month, I buy personal care products, toothbrush, soap, etc. And of course, I save where I can for when I need to pay rent, and I'd like to buy a vehicle at some point. Saving to improve the quality of my life and my family's life.
How have you been treated in the States? Have people been friendly?
Bueno, yo digo que como todo en una ciudad, hay personas buenas, hay personas malas, hay gente que te trata bien, como hay
like in
gente
every
que
city,
te
there are
trata
good
mal.
people and there
En
are
mi
bad
caso,
people.
trato de relacionarme
There
con
are people who
personas
treat
que-
you well and there are people who treat you badly. In my case, I try to meet and interact with people who are interested in me, want to know me, and also people that have something interesting to offer, people that I can learn something from. This has gone well for me. At work, I have met some very good people. My coworkers include me in their lives in some ways, and they help me with my English and try to communicate with me in ways that help me to understand what they're saying. I really can't complain. I feel welcome and included. The city has been good to me.
Have you met people that you would consider friends in the States?
Sí, bueno, en mi trabajo, aparte, conocí a unos amigos que uno de Venezuela.
Well, yes, at work, like I said. Besides that, I made some friends here who are from Venezuela and Colombia. We hang out together on our free days, go out for a drink or dinner, or visit a museum or a park. we also went to the Capitol. And thanks to the interview that the New York Times did with me a couple of months ago, I met a journalist named James who has helped me. He enrolled me in an English school, so I'm studying English now. We stay in touch and meet up sometimes. So yeah, I've definitely met some good people and made some friends here.
So what are your long-term plans? What do you hope for your future and maybe for your son as well?
Bueno, hasta ahora, mis planes a largo plazo serían
So I want to learn English,
estudiar.
and I want to stabilize myself, cultivate myself. I'm only 29, you know? I'm young. So I'd like to take advantage of some of the time I have now to study to be a lawyer. I have always wanted to study law and make that my career. But in Venezuela, I couldn't do it for monetary reasons. I didn't have the money to study at a private university. And as inflation got out of control in Venezuela, I had to abandon those plans. But here, maybe I can finally study law and graduate with a degree. It would help me to find a way to arrange to see my son more, and also give him something to respect in me.
Lever, thank you for sharing your story with me. It's a very powerful story. I wish you the best, and also please let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
Gracias, Sean. No, gracias a ti por darme la oportunidad y por
Thanks, Sean.
interesarte.
Thanks to you for giving me the opportunity and for being interested in me, about my life and how I got here.
According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, as of mid-2022, there were an estimated 103 million forcibly displaced people in the world. Lever's story this week and Sergei's last week represent two of these people, both stories about people leaving their homelands. In Lever's case, due to political persecution in Venezuela, and in Sergei's, due to potential mobilization in Russia to fight a war in Ukraine that he doesn't agree with. They are both representative of a growing diaspora of people fleeing deteriorating circumstances and increasing authoritarianism at home. This phenomenon is putting pressure on democracies as people arrive on their shores and at their borders. As I noted last week, the free world is getting smaller, and as more and more people flee circumstances at home, they are crowding into smaller and smaller free spaces, the remaining democracies in the world. It is straining resources, and it's testing our humanity. There is no easy solution, and I don't pretend here that there is. And frankly, I'm not trying. I just want to share these stories with you. Today's episode is also the last of this second season of Deep Dive. As you're listening, I'm already on hiatus, resting in Dublin, Ireland, and planning for the future of Deep Dive. So for the next 4 or 5 weeks at least, I will be re-releasing previous episodes, those that still resonate in some way, each Friday. I'm also working on another podcast project that I'm very excited about, and I hope to share information about that with you all in the very near future. In the meantime, stay safe and love each other. Chat soon, folks.